Again, add or subtract. That minus 12 plus a minus 8 plus 19. Let me move it so we can see. So this is what we're going to work with here. This one just has parentheses. So what do we do first? The first thing we always do is parentheses. So they're going to be done first. And what would this be? We have a minus 8 plus 19 inside. Is my sign going to be a positive number or a negative number? Positive number. And what do we have? 19 minus 8. Well, 19 minus 8, that's a 11, isn't it? Right? Because 19 minus 8 is 11. Now, I left the parentheses there because I brought this positive down. You just leave the parentheses. And now we deal with the double signs. Whenever you have a double sign, let's remember our rules here. A positive times another positive, it stays what? Positive and positive stays positive. And now we've got a minus 12 plus 11. And would my answer be a positive 1 or would my answer be a negative 1? Okay, negative 1 for my final answer. Let's do another one of these, and then we'll talk about some of the homework questions. About 8 minus, parentheses, minus 12, minus 4. So again, add or subtract here. Order of operations, we do the inside first. Minus 12, minus 4. Those go together, and that makes it now a minus 16, doesn't it? What do we know about the double signs here? Negative and a negative is going to make that now a positive. And now the signs are the same. These are both positive. So I'm going to add them together. And 8 plus 16, that makes it a what? Positive 24. So my answer on that one would be a positive 24. So nothing new there. It's just now we just added in those parentheses. Let's now look at some of the questions from our homework, and let's talk about these. Let's talk about the first one. And a lot of these are just reading and understanding the terminology. So on the first one it says, if A, B, and C are real numbers, is this statement going to be true? 0 minus a number is the negative number. Is that true? Well, if I add or subtract 0 from anything, does it change it? No. Okay, and this is a negative A, right? The other side is a negative A. When you put that 0 on, does it change it at all? No. So these would be the same, so this would be true. 2, 3, and 4, I'm going to leave for you to do. Now let's talk about 5. Now 5, the textbook has you talk about them in a little bit of a different way. And we want to complete the blanks here. And this is how the textbook has you work with these. In order to add a minus 9 and a positive 7. Well, what do we know about these? These are different signs, so what are we going to eventually be doing? We're going to eventually be subtracting, right? They're different signs. So what are we looking at doing here? We change that 9, we make it 9, right? And we subtract them from the 7. So the way they present it in the textbook is they say the absolute value of the difference. They do a little bit different terminology than we do, right? Because what do we do when we work with this? I don't say absolute value, but we're doing that. When I say minus 9 plus 7, how do you put together minus 9 and 7? What do? Well, you see which one's larger. Okay, 9, right? And then we take the 9 and we subtract from it the smaller one, which is what? 7. And that gives you a negative 2. It's the same thing as saying, take the absolute value of that 9 and take 7 from it. I just don't use the word absolute value, but that's what we're doing. And why is it different? Because the signs are different. I'm going to leave 6, 7, 8, and 9 for you to do, because we've covered all of those already. What about 10? Let's look at 10. What do you notice about a minus 8 and a minus 4? Let's work it out and see what that would be. Minus 8, minus 4, those are the same, so it would be a minus what? 12, right? Okay, now, what did we do? We put them together, we took the absolute value. That just said we looked at the 8 and the 4, and then we summed them. Okay, so we took the absolute value of the sum there. So we take the absolute value of each one and then sum them together. So that's all I want to do on that one. And I just want to kind of cover that in case you read the textbook. Their terminology is a little bit different, but we're doing that. I just don't always say absolute value. 11 and 12, you can work those out. Those are fraction ones. We've covered those before. Same thing with 13. (14) and 15 we're going to talk about. Now 15, we'll cover it first. 15, it's basically the same as the first one that we did, right? A number minus 0. Is it going to equal a negative number? Let's plug a number in and see. If you struggle with these, plug a number in. We'll put A being 5. Okay, so let's put 5 in and see what happens. Plug in 5. Okay, so I plugged in that 5. Now, this side was negative. Okay, so I plugged in the 5. So 5 minus 0. What's 5 minus 0? 5. Okay, and negative 5. Are those the same? No. So 15 would be what? False. Whenever you have letters and you want to see if the sides are the same, plug a value in for each one and see if it works or not. This one doesn't work, right? Because this side is positive 5 and this side's a negative. So subtracting that 0 doesn't change it, but this is a positive A and it's not going to equal that negative A. Let's look at 14 now. I'm going to pick two numbers for A and B. So let's say it doesn't matter what numbers you pick. How about A is 3 and B is 5? Doesn't matter what numbers you pick. We're just plugging numbers in to see how it works. Okay, so I'm going to use A is 3, B is 5, and we're going to plug these in, and we're going to see if these are the same. So plug in the 3 for the A and the 5 for the B. When we look here, are these the same? Yep, they will be. Why would they be the same on the sides? Well, let's look. No, I don't have enough room to go down, so we'll go up. What would we do first? Parentheses here. 3 plus 5, what's 3 plus 5? 8, and what's in front of it now? So this side comes out to be a negative 8. All right? What about the other side? Negative 3 and negative 5, these go together. They're both negatives. They stay negative. Minus 3 minus 5, that makes it a minus what? 8. Are these the same? Yes. So that would make this then what? True. You see how I did it? I plugged the numbers in. You pick numbers. You can use any number that you want. You plug them in, and you see if it's true or if it's false. So those come out to be the same, so they are true. 16, you can do 16. What about 17? 17. Stock market gained 49 points on Tuesday, lost 29 points on Wednesday, and I want to find the difference. So what would that look like? I'm not going to finish it out, but when we talk about a gain, what does that mean? It means it's positive. So you gained 49 points on Tuesday, lost 29 points on Wednesday. So that means it's a negative 29, and you can finish it from there. You just put them together. That's just working with the sign numbers. 18, you can work that one out on your own. Now, 19 and 20, I'm going to work out one of them. You're going to work out the other one. I'll do the more difficult one. I'm going to do 19. 19 is the more difficult one. I'm going to leave 20 for you to do. So I'm going to work out 19. 20 is a lot easier, but it's still the same concept of positive and negative numbers. So let's read 19. 20 is going to be a lot easier. So 20 is for you to do. I'm going to work out 19, just so you get an idea on how they're done. The ocean surface is at 0 elevation, so that's at sea level. A diver is underwater at an elevation of 132 feet. It's negative, near rock formation. So let's draw a picture. So this is 19. Pictures sometimes help, especially with these. So here's the diver. This is 0, and this is going to be down 132 feet. So that's why it's negative, is he's down in the water. And he's at a rock formation. The floor has an elevation of minus 297 feet. So that's clear down here. This is the floor. Is everyone okay with that so far? So that's the floor, and it's down here at minus 297. The rock formation rises. We got to watch our wording here. The rock formation rises 194 feet above the ocean floor. So here's the rock formation here. And we're going to have to go up 194 feet from the bottom. So let's see what we actually have here. 194 feet up from the bottom. What does that mean? Let's look at it in terms of the zero. Zeros here, these are all below. So if I'm going 194 feet from the bottom, that means I've got a minus 297, and I'm going to have to add 194 feet to that because you're going up from there. And when I add them together, how many feet below the water actually is it? Okay, these are, one's negative, one's positive, larger one's negative. My sign's going to be negative. And we've got, okay, 297 minus 194. It's a minus 103. Okay, so that's our rock formation. So this is 103 feet below the water. Now it says, for a question, how many feet below the top of the rock formation is the diver? So here's the diver. Here he's actually below that. We need to figure out the difference between them. We want to figure out how far it is below, how far the diver is below. So we're going to subtract them. So we want to find the difference. So we've got 103 feet is where the rock's at, and it's a negative. The diver's below that, so that's minus, because we're subtracting them, a minus 132. What do we know about the double negatives here? Double negatives are going to make this positive. I'm subtracting because I want to find the difference. And now we've got 103 plus 132, and that comes out to then be what? It's going to be positive, and 132 minus 103, well, that comes out to be 29 feet. So that diver is 29 feet below the rock. That's what that means. So that diver is going to be 29 feet below the rock. I should have drew the picture a little bit better, but the diver is down here. Here's the rock formation. He's actually below that. But what we had to do was we had to start at the bottom. We had to add that 194 to it. We got a minus 103. And then we want the difference between them. And we subtracted them. And I took the rock formation, because we want the difference, from the diver. Double negative, made that positive. And I got the 29 feet. So that was going to come out to be 29 feet. I'm not going to work out 20, but we'll talk about it. I'm not going to finish 20, but we'll talk about it a little bit, just so we're on the right track. So Nikki is fishing from a bank 10 feet above the water. In this location, the fish tend to feed 31 feet below the surface. How long must Nikki's fishing line be to reach the fish? Well, that one's a lot easier. What are you going to have to do? You got 31 feet below, right? You need another what? 10 feet for the bank, because it's above, so you can finish it from there. I'm going to leave question 20 for you to finish. Just think about how many total feet of line you need. So you're above it already. You're going to be below that 31. You're going to put those together, and you'll get your answer. Now we have enough time to look now at 1/5. And 1/5 is multiplication. This is going to be, I think, quite a bit easier. So now we're going to look at 1.5. And we're going to be learning now how to multiply sign numbers together. When we multiply fractions, we can cross cancel. So we don't have to worry about getting common denominators. When we multiply, we can cross cancel these, or just multiply across. So when you multiply, you do not need least common denominators. So when we multiply, we're not going to need any least common denominators. It's actually quite a bit easier on these. So we're not going to need least common denominators. We multiply, we multiply. So let's just review our signs a bit. We talked about these before, but let's review our signs. What happens when you have a positive number times another positive number? What do you get out? Positive. Okay? A positive number times a negative number. What do you get out? Negative. Negative times a positive leaves you with what? Negative. And what about a negative times a negative now? Positive. So those are our sign rules. We're just reviewing those. When we multiply, we do not need a common denominator with these fractions. And we're going to start with the fractions. So when we multiply, we don't need common denominators. Okay, so I want you to multiply these. And sometimes students get confused when we're adding and when we're multiplying. Whenever I have those parentheses, that means we're multiplying. So if you see those parentheses, it's multiplying. If the parentheses are not there, it's adding and subtracting. So in this case, we are multiplying. In some cases, you can cross cancel on the diagonal. In other cases, you cannot. 8 and 3 have nothing in common. 4 and 7 have nothing in common. That means we're just going to multiply. What do we know about a negative times a negative? Negative times a negative is a what? Positive. Okay? Negative 8 times negative 4. We know those are going to multiply together. And 8 times 4 is a what? 32. So that's the numerator. What about the denominator? 7 times 3, well, that is a what? 21. And that's your answer. 32 over 21. Let's try another one. Okay, so if I give you this one to multiply. Again, parentheses mean we multiply. Now, we can, in some cases, cross cancel. We've done this before. And now we're just formally reviewing it. We can cancel that 5 and that 15, right? Because the 5 and the 15, they have a 5 in common. So that would be a 1 and a 3 there. What about on this diagonal? Yep, those can cancel again, and that's going to leave you with a minus 1 and a what? 4. Now we multiply across. 1 times a negative 1, it stays a negative 1. And 4 times 3 is what? 12. Let's try another one. Let's put 3 fractions together. Okay, so let's try to multiply these 3 fractions together, and then we'll talk about division. Now, we can cancel however we can cancel. So one numerator and denominator can cancel with another. So let's see what we can do. When I look at this, I could multiply it all across and reduce it at the end, but that's really not what you want to do. Let's go ahead and talk about the signs first. Is my sign of my answer going to be a positive or a negative number? Positive, negative, stays negative, times a positive stays what? Negative. So my answer is going to be negative. Why? Because there's one negative there. So we just already know it's negative, so we can keep track of that so we don't lose it. Now we can cancel on these diagonals because all of this is multiplication. So the 7s can cancel. Those leave you with a 1 and a 1. And that 4 and that 8 can cancel. And that's going to leave you with a 1 and a 2. Those can cancel however you can cancel. And then we just multiply them all together. So 1 times negative 3, that's a negative 3, times 1, that stays a negative 3, doesn't it? Right? We knew our sign should be negative because we have a single negative number. What about down below? 2 times 1 is a 2, times 5 makes it a what? 10. That's it. Now let's talk about dividing. So we're going to be dividing numbers. We'll work with whole numbers first, and then we'll talk about fractions. So I'm going to have you divide. And I first want to talk about 0 to make sure we know the difference between what is 0 and what is undefined. What is this? 0 divided by 120. Is it 0 or is it undefined? Okay. 0 divided by any number stays what? Stays 0. And the way you can remember this is think about it like this. I've got no pizzas and 120 people. How much does each person get? If I don't have any pizzas to begin with, but I've got to feed 120 people, nobody gets any food, right? Can't do that. 0. So 0 divided by any number is 0. The opposite is called undefined. Five divided by 0 is not 0. This is undefined because you cannot take a number and divide it into 0 parts. It doesn't work. So if 0 is in the numerator, what does it come out to be? 0. If 0 is in the denominator, what does it come out to be? Undefined. Make sure you notice the difference here. And I'll write it out in words just so we have it. So 0 in the numerator. For the top half is 0. 0 in the denominator which is the bottom half, is undefined. Okay, so if 0 is in the numerator, the top half, it's 0. If 0 is down below in the denominator, it is called undefined. Now, when we divide, the same rules are going to apply with the signs. So when we divide, we have to worry about 0 in some cases, but we also have to watch our signs. So let's review our signs. They're the same as when we multiply. So a positive divided by a positive stays positive. Positive over negative stays negative. Negative over positive is negative. And negative over negative makes it a positive. So it's going to stay the same as what we did when we multiplied. So positive divided by a positive number is a positive. Positive over negative is negative. Okay. Negative over positive is negative. Negative and negative makes it positive. Okay, so let's just look at a couple of these. And this is going to kind of combine the multiplication and division together. So these are going to be multiply and divide. We're going to work with the whole numbers first, and then we'll go back and talk quickly about fractions and dividing fractions. Let's say I gave you this. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and multiply and divide. Now what we do, and you can do it either way, I like to break it up and do the top half first, if there is anything, and then the bottom half. So in the top half, there's nothing I can do with the 8, so the 8's going to stay as a negative 8. What about down below here? Negative 2 times 3, that makes it a negative what? 6. And what do we know about a negative divided by a negative? Negative over negative is a positive 8 over 6. And we always need to reduce if possible. Now, how do I know that this is going to reduce? 8 and 6 are both even numbers, aren't they? So they both have a 2 in common. So I'm going to start with a 2. So 8 has a 2 in common, so that's going to be a 4. And 6 has a 2 in it, which makes it a 3. So that would come out to give you now 4 what? Thirds. And why is it positive? Because a negative over negative here is going to make that now what? Positive. When we divide fractions, it is a little bit more difficult. When we divide fractions, we have to actually multiply. We multiply by the inverse. So when we divide fractions, we flip the second fraction over. And multiply. So when you have to divide, when you divide these fractions, you have to flip that second fraction over and make it multiplication. So let's say I gave you this. Let's say I gave you this to divide out. And this one I made really easy. And I want you to be careful because I can't cancel the 14 and the 7. And I can't cancel the 8 and the 2. The reason why is I have this division. So what we need to do whenever we divide is you're going to take this fraction and you're going to flip it over. So that fraction gets flipped over. And I'm going to rewrite it as multiplication. So I flip that second fraction over. You always flip the second or the bottom fraction over. And so now we have minus 8 sevenths. We're going to multiply that by, and you can use a multiplication dot or you can use parentheses either way. Flipping that second fraction over, 2 over 14. Now, can I cancel anything out? Now look at it. Can you cancel anything out? Can the 8 and the 14, can those cancel? Can the 2 and the 7 cancel? Nope. But can I reduce down this 2 and this 14? Here, yeah, because they both have a what in common. So I can actually reduce it there, but I can't cancel here. But I can reduce vertically. And that's going to leave you the 1 and a what? 7. And now we can multiply. My answer is going to be negative. Why is it going to be negative? Because a single negative stays negative, and 8 times 1 is a negative 8. Down below, 7 times 7 is a what? 49. So that would come out to be a negative 8 over 49. Let's do another one here, just to make sure we know how these work when we divide. When you divide fractions, you've got to flip them over. Okay, so I want to divide or multiply this one out. Okay, this one's divide. So what do we need to do? We're going to divide this out. What do we do with this fraction here? Flip it over. So I'm going to rewrite this as a minus 9 fourths. I'm going to make it a multiplication, and I'm going to make that minus 7 over 8. And flip it over. So now we've got multiplication. 7 and 4, can those cancel? 8 and 9, can they cancel? Nope. 7 and 8 can't cancel. 9 and 4 can't cancel. So nothing cancels. Negative and negative makes my answer now what? Positive. So now I just multiply across, and I've got 9 times 7. 9 times 7, that's a 63. And 4 times 8, that is a what? 32. And nothing's going to reduce. So that's going to be your answer. You don't have to put the positive sign there. I just did it, so you would see that a negative times a negative makes it a what? Positive. Now, what about a whole number? Let's say I want you to divide positive 4 sevenths. I'm going to divide that by a negative 3. How does it work? I'm going to have to make this a fraction. Yep, 3 over 1. So I'm going to rewrite this now as 4 sevenths. Divide that by a minus 3 over 1. And now what do we do when we divide? Flip this over. So this one now gets flipped over. So now we have 4 sevenths times, flipping it over, a 1 over negative 3. Flipped it over. Multiply across. 4 times 1, that's a 4. 7 times a negative 3, that's a negative 21. And we always bring the negative up to the top when I write my answer. So that negative comes up, and my final answer would be a negative 4 over 21. You bring that negative up to the top there. You can also sometimes write a fraction with division as a fraction over another fraction. And it's the same thing as what we did. It just looks a little bit different. So again, we're going to be dividing these. So let's say I gave you this to divide. Notice how you have two fractions. You have a top fraction. You have a bottom fraction. It, again, is division. So what we do is we can rewrite this as multiplication, and that's going to be 3/4. And you flip this one over, and you can use a multiplication dot or you can use parentheses. I use both because the textbook uses both. That way you've seen them and you're not confused by them. Normally, though, I use parentheses. But sometimes I use a multiplication dot because the textbook sometimes uses multiplication dots. This fraction gets flipped over, and that's a 9/7. So you take your second fraction, and you did what? Flipped it over again. Now you multiply. Can those cancel? Nope. Can those cancel? Nope. Multiply across. 9 times 3 is a 27. 4 times 7, that's a 28. And that is your final finished answer. One last concept in this section to talk about before we look at our homework is an average. How do we find the average of numbers? Well, the average of your numbers is going to be the sum of all the numbers. And we're going to divide that by how many numbers are listed. So when we talk about an average, what you do is you add up all the numbers and you divide by how many numbers you have listed. So I'm going to put some numbers up here. We're going to find the average. Let me write it. Well, let me just use the same wording that the textbook uses. This way it's not confusing in your homework. So let me just write it the same way that the homework is written here. This way it looks the same as your homework. So what is the average? And I'm just going to change the numbers here of all integers between, how about we go with, they used minus 15 and 9. How about we use minus 3 and positive 4. So I want you to find the average of all the integers between minus 3 and positive 4. And this is going to be very similar to a question from your homework. There's actually 2 or 3 of them like this. So what we want to do is we want to find the average. Now let's see what numbers we've got. Integers. Do integers include 0? Yes, 0 is an integer. So let's write out how many numbers we have and what they are. If I'm looking at the numbers between minus 3 and positive 4, and they're going to be inclusive. Okay, so it's going to be inclusive. Let me put that up there just so we know. So it's going to be inclusive, means it includes them. What numbers are we going to be averaging together? Well, if I write them out, we've got minus 3. And I'm just going to write them out vertically. Minus 2, minus 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? So we want to find our average. So how do we find the average? We add them up. So we've got minus 3, minus 2, minus 1. Then we've got 0. We've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. And how many numbers do I have in the list here? Because when we take our average, what we do is we add up all the numbers. Okay, that's your sum. And divide by how many numbers we have listed. How many numbers do we have here? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 numbers listed. So that's why we divide by 8, because there's 8 numbers listed there. Now we can put these together. And you can cancel things out too. Because look what happens. The positive 3 and a negative 3 cancel out. Positive 2, negative 2, those cancel out. Positive 1, negative 1, those cancel out. 0 doesn't matter. And what's the only number that didn't cancel out? 4. And that gives me then 4 over 8. And 4 over 8, what does that reduce down into? 1/2. So your average would be 1/2. So you add up all the numbers and then divide by how many numbers are listed. If it's something like this, what you want to find is all the average of all the integers. Write out what they are. So you want all the integers between minus 3 and 4. Write them all out. 0 is in there. Now let's talk about our homework. And then we'll be done for today. So question number 1. I am going to leave that for you to do. You can finish out one on your own. We've talked about these many, many times. Question number 2. It says, if x and y are both replaced by negative numbers, is the value of this expression here positive or negative? Well, what I want you to do is I want you to use, and I'll put the numbers in I want you to use, x and y have to be negative. So how about you use x is a negative 4, y is a negative 2. So I want you to check that out. And then also try x is a negative 3. Y is a negative 9. Okay, so I want you to try those two and see if there's a difference. Okay, these are both negatives, but I want you to try and see if there's going to be a difference here. I want you to work them out with both sets. So I want you to try first these two. And then I want you to try those two. And I want you to see if the signs are different or if they're the same. And question number 3. For what values of A and B are going to make this result negative? Well, I want you to check numbers. And I want you to find what values they mean. What do we mean about numbers? Which one's got to be bigger? And so I want you to plug in numbers for A and B here. And how about I give you numbers to work with? How about, in this case, check A is 3, B is 9, and I also want you to check, let's say A is 7, B is 1. Okay, I want you to check those, and I want you to see if you see a pattern. And we can talk about this more next class period. But I want you to try those numbers and see. And then maybe you can see which one's going to be bigger to make it work. And we'll discuss it more next week if we need to. Now, you've already done one like question 4. We just did it a moment ago with the average. Question 5, you plug the numbers in. Question 6 is an average. We've done those. Question 7 is division. Question 8 we've talked about. 9 we've talked about. 10 we just divide. Let's talk about 11 real quick here. What's the only number that I can't flip over? Does anyone know what that might be? What's the only number that I can't flip over? 0. Yeah, right? So the only number that doesn't have a reciprocal is going to be what? 0. Because you can't flip 0 over because you get undefined. And that's just a definition. You could look it up, but I figured we might as well talk about it. So on that one, the only number you can't flip over that has no reciprocal is 0. 12 we've done. Okay, 13, we've done those. 2, you plug the numbers in. 14, we've kind of talked about those before. You'll turn this into an expression and simplify it down. But I want you to try 14. 15, we've done one like that with the average. 16, you plug the values in. 17, you just divide them out. 18 is an average. We've talked about that. 19, you should be able to figure that one out too. 20, I'll go ahead and write out for you, just so you know what 20 is actually meaning. The product of 4/5 and minus 2/7 divided by 2/5. Okay, what would that look like? When I talk about product, what does product mean? Multiply. So I've got 4/5, and I'm going to be multiplying it by what? Minus 2/7. And then we've got divided. What does that mean? It means we have to divide, and what's going to go down below? 2/5. You can finish it from here. Okay, so you can finish it from there. But I wrote it out just so you would see it. 19 is similar. You work it out and simplify it down. So what is your homework? What have we covered so far for the homework? What did we go through today? We covered for your homework, we covered 1.4. You should be able to do them all. 1.5. You should be able to do them all. So that's going to be your homework, is 1.4 and 1.5. Next class period, we're going to work through those again. Any questions you might have, we'll go over those. And then we're going to look at 1.6. We'll probably do 1.7. And then get ready for our exam after that. So that's going to be your homework. Next week, we're going to do 1.6, 1.7. And get ready for our exam that following week. Before I forget, though, I do want you to sign the sign-in sheet. So please, before you leave, sign the sign-in sheet. Just make sure your name's on the sign-in sheet. So just sign that sign-in sheet real quick, and I will see everyone then next week.